If someone had told me last week that I'd end up serving tacos to eyeless freaks and dodging giggling customers with detachable jaws, I probably would have told them to lay off the edibles. But here we are. I didn't even get the job, not at first. The new Chipotle opened up across town, one of those shiny ones with sleek counters and way too much chrome. I figured it was perfect. Just a few extra hours to help with rent and maybe keep the lights on without having to sell my soul. I filled out the application, cleaned myself up, even wore my "Trust me, I'm hireable" button up. Nailed the interview, or so I thought. 2 days later, I got the rejection email. Classic. That should have been the end of it. Then yesterday, my phone rang. "Is this Alyssa?" The voice was low and oddly flat. Male, but with that polite customer service edge. "Speaking," I said, already half expecting it to be a spam call. "This is Rick from the new Chipotle. Are you still interested in the position?" I sat up. "Didn't you guys already fill it?" "We did," he said, and there was a pause, like he was deciding how much to tell me. "But we're testing something new. A night shift, just for this location. Quiet hours, smaller crew. You'd be on your own. Think of it as a pilot program." Every part of that sentence should have made me say no. Who eats burritos at 2 in the morning? Why a pilot program at a fast casual place? Why solo? But my bank account didn't care about logic. Rent was due, my phone bill was overdue, and the idea of working alone without anyone breathing down my neck sounded almost peaceful. So I said yes. I showed up that night just before midnight. The place still smelled like paint and bleach, with that weird sterile crispness that makes your eyes water if you breathe too deep. All the chairs were flipped upside down on the tables except for one, where a man was hunched over a clipboard like it owed him money. That was Rick. He looked like he hadn't slept in a week, mid-40s, wire-rimmed glasses, a plain button-up shirt that hung awkwardly like it used to fit better. His eyes were sunken in the kind of way that said he was either really tired or really haunted. Maybe both. "You're sure you want this?" he asked, handing me a small, stapled packet. I frowned. I thought this was just onboarding. "It's more important than that." His voice didn't shift at all, like he was reading from a script. "These aren't textbook procedures. These are for the night shift. Just read them and follow them, especially if someone weird comes in. And they will." I laughed nervously. "You mean like drunks and weirdos, right?" But he didn't answer. He just nodded toward the packet, gave a small, tight smile that didn't reach his eyes, and turned toward the door. "Rick," I called out. "You're not staying?" He paused, hand on the glass. "You'll be fine, Alyssa," he said. "Just follow the rules." Then he walked out into the dark, and I was alone. I stood there for a minute, staring at the door. I don't know what I expected. Maybe a little training, a register tutorial, something more than vague, ominous instructions. But no. Just me, the prep counter, and the packet of not textbook procedures. I sat down at the metal prep table and opened it. The title page read, "Night Shift Protocol, Test Site Only," which already sounded like something from a sci-fi movie. There were only 6 rules, printed in clean font, just strange, simple commands. 1. If the man in the torn flannel orders a steak bowl with no rice, speak softly and do not look at his face. 2. When the woman in the sun hat orders a chicken burrito with everything, double wrap it, even if she insists on one. 3. If the girl in the party dress asks for a kid's meal with chips and queso, place the tray on table 4 and walk away without glancing under it. 4. When the 2 men in black order matching barbacoa bowls with extra cheese, repeat their order only once and make no further conversation. 5. If the barefoot jogger asks for a veggie bowl with extra guac, hand him napkins immediately. Do not let him wait. 6. When the final customer orders carnitas tacos with 1 shell and asks your name, tell the truth, give him the food, and leave through the back door. I read them twice, then snorted and tossed the packet onto the prep table. Weird as hell. Maybe a joke? Some kind of creepy hazing for the new night person? Rick didn't exactly scream funny guy, but maybe the corporate types had tried injecting some weird personality into the job. Either way, it didn't matter. I needed the paycheck. So I got to work prepping the line, filling the meat trays, checking the toppings, making sure everything looked like it had been touched by human hands and not something worse. That was when the door chime rang, and I wasn't alone anymore. The chime wasn't loud, but in an empty restaurant just past midnight, it hit like a gunshot. I flinched, nearly knocking over the gawk tray. There hadn't been footsteps, no car pulling up, just the doorbell, and suddenly, he was there. He stood at the counter, like he'd been molded from the shadows that clung to the corners of the building. He wore a torn flannel shirt, the kind you find crumpled on the floor of a thrift store. Faded red, sleeves frayed, buttons mismatched. And despite the silence, I felt the rule echo through my mind like someone whispering it from behind me. If the man in the torn flannel orders a steak bowl with no rice, speak softly and do not look at his face. I didn't think. My mouth moved on its own. "Welcome to Chipotle," I said, barely above a whisper. "What would you like?" "Steak bowl," he rasped. "No rice." His voice was rough, like gravel grinding in a dry throat. My hands knew the rhythm. Metal tongues, scoop of steak, sprinkle of cheese, a little pico de gallo. Keep it neat, keep it quiet. The silence stretched between us like a cord pulled tight. He didn't shift his weight, didn't look around. He just stood there, still as stone, breathing slow and deep, if he was even breathing at all. My fingers trembled on the sour cream. "Don't look at his face." That's what the rule said. I should have listened, but there's something awful about silence. It gnaws at you, makes your thoughts louder. I told myself I just needed a glance, just one quick look to shake the fear, to prove he was just some weird guy with an unfortunate shirt and maybe a sinus infection. I looked up, and I regretted it instantly. His face was pale. Not sick pale, not tired pale, dead pale, the color of cold clay. His features looked like they'd been drawn too carefully by someone who'd never seen a real person. Lips too thin, nose a little too sharp. But it was the eyes that broke me, or, more accurately, the lack of them. Where his eyes should have been were two deep, smooth hollows. No lids, no lashes, no texture. Just empty pits like someone had taken an ice cream scoop to his skull and carved them clean out. He didn't move. Didn't react. He just stared. Or whatever the word is for when something without eyes watches you anyway. The weight of those hollows settled over me like a cold hand pressed against the back of my neck. Every instinct I had screamed for me to run, to hide, to throw the bowl at him and bolt out the emergency exit. But my legs didn't work. My brain was jammed. I was barely breathing. I finally slid the bowl toward him, keeping my hand steady even though my nails were digging into the counter. He took it. One slow movement, lifted it without looking down, turned without a sound, and walked out the door. I stood there for a long time after he left. Didn't move, didn't clean up, didn't breathe too hard, just waited to see if he was going to come back. But he didn't. Only then did I feel my knees unlock. I gripped the counter to keep from collapsing, my hands slick with sweat, heart pounding loud enough to drown out the buzz of the fluorescent lights overhead. That's when it hit me. The rules were real. This wasn't hazing. This wasn't a joke. Something had just come into my restaurant that wasn't human, and I'd stared directly into its empty face like a complete idiot. I wanted to call Rick. Wanted to tell him I quit. That I was leaving. That I didn't care about rent or pilot programs or whatever shady demon burrito experiment this was. But then the door chimed again. Another customer. Another rule. I wiped my palms on my apron, took a breath that felt too thin. I was in this now. And whatever this was, it wasn't over. I was still recovering from the first one when the next customer walked in. This time, the door chime sounded normal. No sudden materialization. No weird shadows. Just a regular ding and a soft swish of the door. For a second, I let myself hope maybe this one was just a real person. Maybe the flannel guy had been a one-time fluke, like some kind of cursed welcome committee. But then I saw her. She floated more than she walked. That's the only way I can describe it. Her movements were too smooth, too gliding. She wore a wide-brimmed sun hat, the kind you'd see at a garden party or a beach wedding, and a light floral dress that fluttered slightly even though the air inside was still. And she was smiling. Not in a nice way. Too many teeth. Too much enthusiasm. The kind of smile that says, I already know how this ends, and you won't like it. Rule 2 popped into my head before she even opened her mouth. When the woman in the sun hat orders a chicken burrito with everything, double wrap it even if she insists on one. Sure enough, she stepped up to the counter with a cheerful lilt to her voice. "One chicken burrito," she said brightly. "With everything. Single wrap." I hesitated. It was such a tiny thing. A tortilla. What did it matter? I could have followed her request and still technically fulfilled the order, but the way she looked at me, that smile, those eyes just barely visible under the shadow of her hat, it made the back of my neck tingle. "I'll double wrap it just in case," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Makes it easier to hold." Her smile tightened. "No," she said sharply. "Just one." I didn't respond, just started assembling the burrito, making sure everything was layered right. Chicken, beans, cheese, salsa, the works. Then I grabbed a second tortilla and wrapped it again without asking. I expected her to object. Maybe hiss. Maybe do that thing the guy before her did, just stand and radiate wrongness. But she didn't. She took the burrito, still smiling, and brought it to her mouth. That's when it happened. Her jaw unhinged. I mean, literally. I heard the wet pop as the hinges dislocated and her mouth opened too wide. The skin along her cheeks cracked like overstretched rubber, and the corners of her lips tore upward toward her ears. Rows of uneven, jagged teeth lined the cavern that replaced her mouth. Some were baby-sized. Others looked like they belonged in a shark. She took a single bite, straight through the burrito and into her own hand. Her finger snapped off like a breadstick. She didn't flinch. Instead, she chewed it slowly, and she giggled. Not a girlish laugh, not something you'd hear at a dinner party. This was sharp and high and wrong, echoing across the empty restaurant like she was laughing at a punchline I hadn't heard yet. Then she turned and walked out, one arm hanging limply, one mouth still full of flesh and tortilla. The silence she left behind was thicker than before, heavier. It settled over me like dust in an attic, clinging to my skin. I stood behind the counter, arms stiff, breathing through my mouth because I was afraid of what I might smell. Then the third one came in. No chime this time, no footsteps, just a soft tug at my awareness that made me turn toward the entrance. A little girl, maybe 6 or 7, stood in front of the counter. She wore a pink party dress, her shoes scuffed, her hair tied with faded ribbons. No parents, no noise, just her. Her eyes were huge, not cartoon huge, real huge, wet and glassy like marbles floating in jelly. She didn't speak, just looked up at me and pointed to the kids' meal menu behind me. Chips, queso. Rule 3. If the girl in the party dress asks for a kid's meal with chips and queso, place the tray on table 4 and walk away without glancing under it. It sounded stupid at first. Don't look under the table. But after the last 2, I didn't question it. I made the tray quietly, set it neatly with a juice box, and walked it over to table 4 in the corner. She followed me silently, those glassy eyes never blinking. I placed the tray on the table and turned to walk away. I should have been fine, but the floor was slick. Maybe from earlier, maybe just a stray drip of salsa or something worse. But my heels slid, and I went down hard. My hand smacked the tile, my shoulder jarred, and my head turned instinctively to the side, under the table. She wasn't sitting, she didn't even have legs. Her lower half was a mass of tentacles, thick and slick, coiled around the chair legs, glistening in the fluorescent light. They pulsed faintly, like something breathing. Water, or something like it, was pooling beneath her, spreading outward in cold, wet puddles. One of the tentacles twitched, lifted, reached. I scrambled backward on my hands and knees, kicking over a napkin holder and slamming into the drink machine with a grunt. The girl didn't move. She just picked up her juice box and sipped from the straw, like she was on a field trip and I was the freak. I stayed there, crouched behind the soda fountain, trying to slow my breathing. That was 3. 3 customers. 3 monsters. 3 rules that had suddenly stopped feeling like jokes and started feeling like the only reason I was still alive. And the night was far from over. I stayed crouched behind the soda machine longer than I cared to admit. Every time I tried to move, my hands trembled too much to push off the floor. My legs felt like they were made of cement. I just kept picturing those tentacles, slick, glistening, curling around chair legs like they belonged there. Like she belonged there. Eventually I stood, slowly. My apron was soaked, my palms sticky from God knows what. I didn't even check to see if the girl was still there. I couldn't. I had rules now. Follow the rules, survive the shift. That was all I needed to think about. I headed back to the line, took a breath, and tried to focus on something stupid and normal. Like whether we were low on pico de gallo. I didn't even get to finish that thought before the next ones arrived. The chime rang again, This time, 2 men walked in together. They didn't speak, didn't look at me. They just stood at the counter, side by side, dressed in matching black suits, white shirts, thin black ties, and polished shoes that made no sound against the tile. Their faces were bland, symmetrical, like someone had used the same template twice. Same jawline, same nose, same lips. Even their hair was parted on the same side. They looked like FBI agents if the FBI recruited from wax museums. Rule 4 came flooding back the second I saw them. When the 2 men in black order matching barbacoa bowls with extra cheese, repeat their order only once, and make no further conversation. They stood there in silence until I managed to clear my throat and whisper, "Can I help you?" They answered at the same time. I felt my stomach twist. I repeated the order exactly once, just as the rule said. 2 barbacoa bowls, extra cheese. Got it. I kept my head down, focused on the food, hands moving fast but careful. Barbacoa, cheese, lettuce, some corn. I slid both bowls across the counter and stepped back. They each picked one up, turned without a word, and walked over to a table in the middle of the room. They sat at the exact same moment, same posture, elbows at the same angle, spoons lifting at the same time. It was like watching a glitchy video on repeat. I couldn't stop staring. Not because I wanted to, but because the unnatural sameness held me in place, like I was trying to spot a difference that didn't exist. Like I had to be sure I wasn't losing my mind. But I didn't speak. I didn't ask who they were or why their movements were synchronized down to the blink. That part, at least, I got right. I waited behind the counter, heart still pounding. At least they were quiet. At least they were eating. That had to count for something, right? I grabbed a cup of water just to give my hands something to do. They were still shaking, but slower now. Halfway through sipping, I realized something strange. Something that made the hairs on my arms stand up all over again. They weren't chewing. They were going through the motions. Spoon up, food to mouth. But I never heard a single chew. Never saw them swallow. They were pretending to eat, pretending to be normal. I looked away before I could fall down that rabbit hole. I focused on wiping the counter, pretending I didn't hear the faint sound of one of them tapping the table in a perfect rhythm. 4 taps, a pause, 4 taps again. I don't know how long they stayed. 5 minutes? 10? Eventually, I heard the chairs scrape. I glanced up, just enough to see their backs as they walked out the door, side by side. Bowls still full. They hadn't taken a single bite. I stood completely still until the glass door clicked shut behind them. Only when I was sure, absolutely sure, they were gone, did I breathe. No unhinged jaws or puddles on the floor. Just something pretending to be human, and doing a terrible job of it. 4 customers down, 2 more to go. The clock above the prep line said it was nearly 2:30 a.m., but it felt like I'd been there for years. The air had shifted again, thicker, heavier, like the walls themselves were holding their breath. The rules weren't just guidelines, they were boundaries, lifelines. Like walking a tightrope in a thunderstorm, and I was running out of rope. I didn't think anything could still surprise me after the last 4. But the next one, he didn't float or glitch or ooze tentacles. He ran. The door chime went off in a blur, and the guy practically stumbled inside, gasping like he'd been sprinting for miles. His chest heaved. Sweat plastered his shirt to his skin, and his legs were bare, except for running shorts that looked like they hadn't seen a wash in weeks. He wasn't just barefoot. His soles were blackened, torn in places, like he'd been running on gravel and glass. His eyes darted wildly around the restaurant before they landed on me. Rule 5. If the barefoot jogger asks for a veggie bowl with extra guac, hand him napkins immediately. Do not let him wait. I reacted before I even processed what was happening. My hand shot toward the napkin tray like it was a fire extinguisher. It was empty. I froze for half a second. Just one. But that was enough to feel my gut twist into a knot. "I'll be right back," I said quickly, voice cracking. I turned and sprinted toward the supply room, shoes squeaking across the tile. The air felt thick back there, like something was pressing down from the ceiling, but I shoved it aside and yanked open the cabinet. I didn't even bother shutting the door. I just grabbed a fat stack and ran. By the time I got back to the counter, he was still there, but something was wrong. His breathing was slower now, too slow. His face was tilted upward slightly, and his lips were curled into a peaceful smile. And he was bleeding. Not from a wound, Not from his feet, from his face. Thick streams of blood poured from both eyes, trailing down his cheeks like tears. It leaked from his ears, his nose, his mouth, dripping steadily down his chin and onto the counter. There was already a spreading pool forming on the floor beneath him. The glass in front of the guac bin was smeared with it. He didn't react to any of it. Just kept smiling. Calm, almost relieved. I moved slowly, like I was approaching a sleeping animal, and offered the napkins with both hands. He took them gently, pressed them to his face with care, like a man dabbing away sweat after a jog. His hands left red streaks on the paper. Then he nodded, just once, and turned around. He left as silently as he'd arrived, bloody footprints marking each step toward the door. I didn't follow. I just stood there, staring at the mess. It was all over the counter, on the floor. Some of it had gotten into the salsa bin, bright red, mixing with the tomatoes in a way that made me nauseous. I grabbed gloves and towels and started cleaning. I scrubbed harder than necessary, not because it helped, but because I needed something to do, anything to keep my mind from spiraling. I kept thinking about that 1-second delay, that pause when the tray was empty, that moment where I had to turn my back. I'd broken the rule, and something horrible had happened. It hadn't killed him, but it had done something to him, and it left a part of him behind. Blood has a smell, it's metallic and sharp, and no matter how many lemon-scented wipes I used, I couldn't get rid of it. It was in the air, in my nose, in my clothes. I tossed the gloves, wiped my face, and leaned against the counter. 5 down, just 1 left. When the final customer orders carnitas tacos with 1 shell and asks your name, tell the truth, give him the food, and leave through the back door. I didn't know when he'd show up. I didn't know what he'd be, but I knew I had 1 shot to get it right, and no margin left for error. I didn't bother cleaning the blood off the last corner of the counter. There was no point. The air felt too thick, like the walls were closing in. The fluorescent lights overhead flickered every so often, and I couldn't tell if it was the power or if the building itself was starting to breathe. I kept glancing at the door. Any minute now. I knew it. I didn't know how, but I could feel it, like how you feel a storm coming in your bones. Rule 6. When the final customer orders carnitas tacos with 1 shell and asks your name, tell the truth, give him the food, and leave through the back door. Just 1 more. Then I'd be done. The shift had turned into a countdown. 6 rules, 6 monsters, 6 chances to die or survive, depending on how closely I followed instructions that barely made sense. The lights buzzed again. The tile under my feet felt colder than before. And then the chime rang. I turned toward the front without thinking. It was Rick. Or, it looked like him. Same button-up shirt, same glasses, same clipboard tucked under one arm, but his smile was wrong. Too wide. His teeth were too perfect, too uniform, like someone had taken a photo of a grin and printed it on the front of a mask. His eyes were lighter, too, paler. Not the tired brown from earlier, these were almost gray, like dusty glass marbles. He walked up to the counter casually, like it was just another day, like he wasn't the final name on the rule list. Carnitas tacos, he said. 1 shell. His voice didn't sound right either. It was smooth, practiced, like someone pretending to remember how human speech was supposed to sound. Then came the question. What's your name? My stomach clenched. I wanted to lie, wanted to say Emily or Jess or no one. But I remembered the jogger. I remembered what happened when I hesitated, when I broke the rule. So I said it. My name is Alyssa, I answered quietly. I placed the single carnitas taco on the tray and slid it across the counter, keeping my eyes low, my breath shallow. He took it. He didn't speak again, didn't bite into it, just smiled with those picture-perfect teeth. The lights overhead flickered, this time more violently. A low hum rolled through the air, almost like a growl that came from everywhere and nowhere all at once. I didn't wait to find out what would happen next. I walked straight to the back door, pushed it open, and stepped outside. No clock out, no closing checklist, no cleaning. Just me, the sound of my own heart hammering in my ears, and the faint glow of morning light creeping across the sky. The air was cool, real. I could feel it in my lungs. And then, I heard tires crunching on gravel. A car pulled into the lot. I turned just in time to see another Rick step out, the real one, rubbing his eyes, looking half awake and totally confused. "Alyssa?" he asked, squinting at me. I took off my apron and shoved it into his arms. My hands were still shaking. I don't care what this is, I said. Pilot program, joke, test run. I'm done. I'm not risking my life to make burritos for things that don't blink. He opened his mouth, maybe to ask a question, maybe to tell me I was overreacting. I didn't give him the chance. I walked away. Just a quiet, exhausted walk toward the edge of the lot, toward the sunrise. The real Rick stood there frozen, holding my apron, looking like he had no idea what had just happened. Good. I don't want anyone else to know what it felt like inside that place. The rules didn't explain everything. They didn't tell me what the creatures were or why they came or what they wanted. But they kept me alive. That's enough for me. I don't care if they're still running that shift. I don't care if someone else took the job. But if you're ever driving through my town and you spot a Chipotle with the lights still on after midnight, keep driving. No amount of guacamole is worth it.